Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Magic Mirror podcast. Some of you might recognize something a little bit different. That is because we do not have Con the Trinket Mage here this week. Second time this has happened, so usual protocol, I shall take over the hosting and the ad read. This episode is sponsored by Card Castle, the easy way to sort your collection digitally. You can use our link in our description for 1 month of free premium. Thank you to Card Castle for sponsoring the podcast. Today, we have our usual co-host, Salubrious Snail.
Hello.
And special guest, member of the Commander format panel, Attack on Cardboard.
Hello.
If you want to give us a quick rundown of your channel and what you do for those that don't know.
Yeah, sure. Have you been in a game where you've recently been soft cheated? You might be due for some compensation. Come on over to Attack on Cardboard, where you can find out about all the rules of Magic the Gathering and potentially get your, compensation, win, judge call. I talk about the rules of the game.
Yeah.
That's what we do at Attack on Cardboard.
Very well edited videos too. I love your editing.
To my detriment, by the sounds of it, 'cause they take forever to produce.
You seem to get pretty fast turnaround when new rules come out and stuff.
It's the pressure. If I have, oh my God, pressure, there's something coming out, then I do it. But if I don't have that, it's just like, I'll do a video when I feel like it.
Well, anyway, it's lovely to have you here,
Yeah, thank
especially
you.
since you're a member of the Commander format panel. So we shall be discussing about the new announcement, the announcement of brackets. For those that aren't in the know, wow, I'm very impressed with your ability to stand or rock. Brackets are 1 through 5.
Yep.
1 being exhibition, which is the weakest bracket you can be in. It's kind of just like women looking left. There's only chairs in the art. They're kind of focused on that instead of winning.
Your artistic expression bracket.
Yeah, exactly. Bracket 2 is defined as you're looking to win, but you're not doing so with a combo, or you're not really having a lot of powerful cards. There's a list of powerful cards that we'll get into later in the podcast called Game Changers. You are defined by winning, but it's more fair, quote unquote, win than bracket 3 would be, with infinite combos and whatnot being on the table. Well, you can have infinite combos in bracket 2. They just can't be 2 card, from what I understand.
If I may interject, bracket 2 is precon level. That's like the benchmark they've kind of set.
Yeah.
They've used the words average precon level, which even then, and we'll no doubt get into this later, I think is not the best choice of words.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
Average precon level is what they say.
Yeah, average precon level. I even avoided trying to say it in the description just because like it feels so weird to say. Like it doesn't feel like anything. But like I said, we'll get into that later.
We'll get into it.
Yeah, for sure.
Bracket 3 is defined as infinite combos. The only thing is, and I quote, no chaining turns, extra turns that is sort of the restriction. You can have up to 3 game changers, which is once again the list of cards that were deemed pretty powerful. Like their impact is so strong that they change the game. Infinite combos are on the table, but you're still making some amount of conceit for not being powerful. There's bracket 4, which is extremely high power. You are very well tuned, no limit on game changers in your deck, tutoring, all the sort of fun stuff. And then bracket 5 is CEDH.
Yep.
So we have a lot to talk about with the system. So once again, the system is in beta.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing to stress, that this is literally a beta. It's been out at the time of recording for 5 days, less than that. We haven't had MagicCon Chicago yet. Testing needs to be done. The system as it is currently is not going to be the system that it is, in its entirety by the end of April, we've said, is the quote unquote full release.
Yeah, I just want to say, not to sound too crazy, without thinking or anything, but I really think as a first draft, this is pretty stellar. Way better than the original pitch of once you put a Cyclonic Rift in your deck, you're automatically in the highest bracket, right? That was the original talking point. Or having different bracket combos and lists of what cards can be ran in that bracket. This is way cleaner, way nicer. The game changers I like. This is a pretty great system, just right out of the gate.
Yeah, from what we had, which is my deck's a 7. This is, a million times better.
Can we get a peer into the Commander format panel's sort of process to making the bracket system as it is?
Yeah.
What were the major discussion points and arguments sort of happening?
So obviously, I guess the most important thing is under NDA, as I've stressed to everybody, I'm allowed to say I don't like things. I'm allowed to say I dislike this or I don't agree with this. What I'm not going to tell you is obviously, oh, person X voted for this and I think this is a terrible decision and you guys should all message them and tell them how terrible they are. This is all obviously my own opinions and my experiences. Having said that, everybody in the CFP so far, extremely lovely. You've got the entire Magic community represented, everyone from beginners, which I feel like I sort of encompass the beginners to intermediates. And then you've got CEDH, which is extremely well represented. I think I've told some people who are like, oh, CEDH won't be looked after. No, CEDH is literally discussed. I want to say like every single day. It's front of mind. People do want to take care of the CEDH community. But yeah, when we first got brought in, it was the whole, hey, this brackets is the idea. But there was also other methods that we were looking to discuss about how we could do it. Like Gavin didn't say, okay, I've decided that we're going to do brackets and love it or leave it. Like that's it. He said, hey, look, there's brackets. We've got some other methods, which I feel like I can discuss. Like it's pretty clear that we're not going down this other route at this point, but basically there was brackets and what's the word they call it? Is it psychographs?
Oh,
what's Timmy, Johnny, and Spike called? What's the official name for them?
Player, man.
It's like psychographs or something. I would have to search it out. Anyway, those characters, and it was basically, could we represent those styles of players as like the, alternative? So we had discussions about like, do we go down this route? Do we go down the brackets route? Is there any other routes that we go down? I actually brought up, do you guys play Pokemon? Video game Pokemon at all?
I do not.
Do you guys know about the Smogon tier list?
I haven't played a lot of the Pokemon video game. I played a lot of the card game, but I do know that there are brackets and competitive Pokemon like overused and underused and things like that.
Yeah, the real quick TLDR is the competitive Pokemon scene, and at least the Smogon scene, has, rarely used, underused, overused, and then Ubers. And they're basically your brackets right there, depending on how many Pokemon you pick from each of those tiers to put you in the brackets. And they have a committee which would probably come together. I don't know how often they come together, but they look at the metrics because obviously the Smogon stuff's all done through their website. And then they change the tiers quite regularly of where a Pokemon is at, depending on its play rate. But yeah, obviously we've ended up with brackets and this is where we are. Yeah, I guess that's probably a good start. This is how we got to brackets.
I have a few questions before we hop into the discussion of the game changers list, which I'm intending on having be the second half of this podcast, and sort of staying in the positive area here. Have you seen brackets do anything substantial so far? Have you heard any good feedback that really stands out to you as like pretty quality?
So, I mean, I think the biggest thing at the moment is everybody has just looked at that picture that was released in the article, and they've just looked at that picture and they've just ignored everything else. I mean, I posted on Blue Sky recently, the current feedback or the amalgamation of feedback that I've got so far all seems to culminate to challenge, impossible level, Commander players talking to each other. It does my head in. That like, I've got people in my messages being like, oh, I want to play the bracket 2 restrictions because bracket 2 excludes the game changer list completely. And then I want to play this, but it says that it's meant to be precon level. But I feel the deck that I built is higher than a precon. But I don't want to play in bracket 3. And so I'll go, okay, well, just tell your table that then. Hey, I've got a bracket 2 deck. It plays like a 3. I don't want to play a game, with game changers. Just tell them that. Just talk to your table.
Yeah,
like,
this is a communication tool.
Precon. Yeah. But it says precon, so I must make sure that the deck I built is precon level. And it's like, no, it's the system is a tool. It's not hard rules. We don't want to lock anybody into anything. That's what the banned list is for. That is, and I've said this on Blue Sky as well, the strictest we will ever get, as far as I can see anyway, is the banned list. That is literally where we'll go, no, you cannot play these cards. Everything else, do what you want. Just use this as a tool to talk about your decks instead of just saying, oh, well, I think my deck is a 7 and this person's deck is a 7, so let's see how we go there.
Yeah, and I know I got the sense that a lot of people were kind of taking the visual and taking kind of the really hard restrictions and trying to craft like these, either gaming the system or just like really over focusing otherwise on the kind of specific restrictions as opposed to kind of thinking about the spirit of them, what sorts of decks they were thinking of as opposed to what exact limitations were being imposed.
And I think it's the case of like, we're damned if we do, damned if we don't. I think with the brackets, we've given like a really nice guideline of what you can do without forcibly boxing people into certain slots. I don't think we ever want to produce something that says, here is exactly what you need to be in this bracket. Here is exactly what you need to be in this bracket, and just lock people in, because that's where you'll get even more bad actors, I feel, coming out to be like, well, pushes glasses up, because of these cards I've done here, and here, I'm actually a bracket too. And so you guys can't complain when I crush you all during our game. Whereas at least with current brackets, it's like, okay, well, this is how I've built my deck. This is what I think it is. Let's sit down and play, and then we can discuss afterwards.
For me, one thing that comes to mind now, sort of getting into the more like questionable, dubious stuff, we mentioned it a little bit earlier, talking a bit about what precon level decks mean, because precons are certainly a wide range. Just recently, we had Eternal Might. I recommend Snail's video talking about it. That deck is disjointed. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you sort of have Energy, the Jeskai, Energy, Modern Horizons 3 precon. All those Modern Horizon 3 precons are actually pretty tuned. And some even have combos in them, like Zamone and Duskborn, right? So like it's very weird, the sort of spectrum that we're presented in terms of what a precon level deck is.
Definitely the words used to describe the tier has missed the mark. And it's something that we'll be reviewing for the future. Like, again, the bracket 2 is not, again, just precons full stop. Rachel Weeks has recently put out a better visual version of what she sees the brackets as, and a lot of us agree with it. So she's put as core, and the description, I want a relaxed game with a satisfying ending. Decks are focused and functional, but contain suboptimal cards and strategies, comparable to an average modern precon. Wins are often telegraphed or incremental. I think that sums it up pretty clearly. Like, if you do think about a precon, and this is one that I mentioned in my video, Stellar Lee precon. If you have a good pilot, someone who can, do a little bit of planning, the Stellar Lee precon can come out of nowhere and just deal 50 damage to the table. But that's still, precon level. It's clunky. You do have to do a lot of forethought, compared to, say, the upgraded decks where 1, 2, 3, and I win the game. Like, I think we've all had those games where you're playing, and then someone at the table goes, all right, well, I win now. And then that's the end of the game, and everybody's left very unsatisfied. Versus those games where the green player has, been slowly building up their board position, has slowly become arch enemy, and then they go, okay, overrun, win the game that way. I feel like those losses are more satisfying than the guy that just goes, all right, surprise, I win.
Yeah, just the random from hand combos is kind of what bracket 2 is sort of blocking out, at least 2 card ones that are at least a very low amount of mana.
Yeah, I definitely broadly agree that telegraphed is a good indicator in theory, but in practice, I think sometimes there is a little bit of subjectivity to that term. There are newer players who would miss signals that I feel should be obvious. And at the same time, there are more experienced players than me who would nail down somebody about to combo where I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't really see that. Okay. So definitely, it does have a little bit of flexibility with that, but I definitely think that's a good kind of standard to set broadly.
Yeah, exactly. It's about, like, telegraphed, yes, is subjective, and it's not going to encapsulate everything, but by putting that out there, it's at least going to minimize it a little bit, which I think is the goal of the system. Is just, it's not going to ever eradicate bad games of Magic, right? That's like an impossible thing to expect.
Yeah.
But it will at least put a hamper on ones that would have happened via bad communication at the start, because there's now a framework for that communication, is kind of what I got from the bracket system as a whole.
Yeah, there's the other side of the coin as well, where you've obviously got the deck building restrictions. But then I think, again, another thing that people are overlooking is intent, because it's very hard to tell everybody what your intent is with a deck. But again, I feel like if you, again, consider that brackets 1 through 3 are the social brackets, and then even 3 is kind of starting to lean more into the competitive side of things, because obviously it allows the game changer cards. And then 4, again, even if you imagine like a bar graph with level of fun versus like focus on winning, you can see that at exhibition and core, the bar is, fun is really high, winning is really low. And then if you just imagine those, oppositely going against each other, fun decreases, winning intent increases as you go up the bracket tier list. I think that's the other thing to think about too when looking at these brackets.
For me, by the way, I do want to kind of mention that the Game Changers cards, one of them is Thassa's Oracle. I could totally see someone playing a Merfolk deck and just being like, yeah, I like Thassa's Oracle because it's card selection, or even better, in an exhibition theme deck with Thassa as the commander. This is my Thassa theme deck. I have Thassa's Oracle in here, but I'm never winning the game with the trigger.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the thing where it's like, you need to talk to people still. Like, you can have an Exhibition 1 deck with Thassa's Oracle in it. Like, nobody is going to be like, well, actually, this is a CDH deck. It's like, no, I clearly built my deck.
It's not a hard rule, the Game Changers. If you're using the cards for a different reason, it's all about intent, of course. Yeah. I did mention Game Changers here. I do want to kind of pivot into that after this next thing. I do have like a personal gripe with one of the wordings of these. It's in bracket 3, the definition of no chaining turns. It goes into more detail in the article, which I do appreciate. It gives the example of Edric, Spymaster of Trest. Normally you fill this deck with a bunch of evasive little dudes, so you draw like 6 to 7 cards every turn. Chaining extra turns like that is the example that's given of this is not allowed in bracket 3. For me, when I read on the graphic, no chaining turns, I could totally see someone being caught up by an infinite turn combo, something like Archaeomancer plus Ephemerate plus a Time Warp, or Magistrate Scepter plus a Thrumming Bird and a Proliferation Doubler like Tekethal. These are true infinite turn combos, and I could see people feel angle shot if I'm comboing like this and it's infinite and you're never taking another turn again guaranteed.
Yeah, so did you put those cards in there to do that combo? Did you design the deck to take infinite turns?
I designed the deck to take infinite turns, but I think there's a big separation between I am chaining turns and I am actually infinite with turns, because bracket 3 is the combo bracket. We're finally in infinites. So once we're taking infinite turns, I feel like that's different than I'm going to hit a brick percentage of the time, right? Like a Narset player attacking. Let's see if I hit an extra turn spell, right? It's not guaranteed. It's non-deterministic versus deterministically, this is infinite. I like to think there's a separation there. If you disagree, I would love to hear though.
It's tough, right? I think I don't know. The way that I read it and the way that I would say it is, if someone's sitting there taking multiple turns in a row without an end in sight, that feels to me like chaining turns. Regardless of how they're doing it, they are chaining turns. Like if they make the active choice to take another turn, and then in that extra turn, they make the active choice again to do it, that sounds like chaining turns to me.
Yeah, so it is chaining turns, literally by like the definition of chaining turns. But if it is deterministically infinite amount of turns, surely you should know this game's just over, right? How is that any different than winning with like a Blood Artist, like infinite combo loop?
I guess it's the whole, what feels worse, losing to infinite turns or losing to a late game 2-card combo.
I agree to some extent. If someone's like, I'm going to play out every single turn, that's a nightmare. For me, I pick up my deck and I show you my Blue Sun Zenith and I say, let's go to the next one, right? Like it feels different, but like you can't really police everyone making sure that they have a Zenith in their deck that reshuffles, right? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Again, and this is all comes back to just talk to the table. Hey guys, there could be infinite turns here. I don't know. Like sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. You just play the deck against the table. And if you felt the general vibe of the table was good at the end, you can keep doing it. But if the general vibe of the table was like, yeah, we don't want to play against that again, well, there you go. You got your answer. You make changes or you bump it up to the next bracket.
I feel like that's a pretty good answer to the qualm I was having.
Yeah.
I know my biggest point of contention with the article as it laid out the system was with infinite combos. So I don't know if that's the thing I should bring up, and if so, when, but I'm definitely kind of...
Absolutely right now is the time to fire that.
Okay. I find the distinction between 2 and 3 card combos extremely arbitrary because I feel like combos often have a third piece, like a sack outlet or like a payoff, like a...
Yeah, like Gravecaller, Phyrexian, Altar. Like, yeah, okay, that's infinite.
Sure, yeah, just like some sort of payoff, a Blood Artist, a sack outlet, a Impact Tremors type thing. A deck might have like 5 or 6 of these. It might be fairly easy to come by, but it is a third piece. It turns the thing into a 3-piece combo. These can happen on like turn 5. And I found it very odd that 3-piece combos are literally never mentioned and is only 2-piece combos.
So I do think though, with the wording though, technically the no 2-card infinite combos catch that. Because again, if we go back to just the Phyrexian Altar Gravecrawler combo, like, yeah, it does nothing, but it does infinitely get you ETBs, it infinitely gets you, leaves the battlefield triggers. Like there is an infinite there. Yeah, you're not winning the game for it, but that's infinite right there.
Is Basalt Monolith a 1-card infinite combo then? Because it can tap and untap infinitely.
So again, like, yeah, that doesn't inherently win the game right there. But then if you've got, I don't know, is there something that cares about untapping and retapping stuff? But even then, you've met the definition of a 2-card infinite, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. In this case, because it would be infinite mill with Mesmeric Orb. Whenever a permanent becomes untapped, that permanent's controller mills a card.
I think that the no 2-card infinite combos catches a lot of stuff people that are going to try and make the social brackets of Commander not fun just by having these 2-card infinites. We've caught them and gotten rid of it. If someone's going to rock up with Exodia combo, they've got to assemble all these 5 cards and then they go off, sure, go for gold. But I think it's like staple 2-card combos that you see at all the tables, Thassa's Oracle, Demonic Consultation, Infinite. I can't list them all.
Sure.
Here.
You're absolutely gonna have angle shooters that are like, actually, Iara Plague of Vermin technically doesn't do infinite anything. It just drains all your life points when I have more. It's like, but like these people are gonna get like pushed out, right?
Yeah.
Like, that they're an angle shooter.
Again, and it all comes back. I'm going to be saying it so much this podcast. It all comes back to the conversation. Every game of Commander, you have the pre-game conversation. And then I think everybody should be having an end game conversation. Hey, how did we feel about this game of Commander? Did everybody have fun? Did people feel like they participated in the game? I think that is so important because, again, it gives you the vibe of your deck, because it's very easy to sit with your deck, your Lord High Artificer stacks deck, and be like, well, I had fun. But then when you find out that, the 3 other people just thought it was the most miserable hour of their life, you might reconsider playing that deck again. We've all been there.
An hour is generous.
yeah, whatever it is. I don't know.
Okay, sure. So like with the combo thing, I guess it's maybe more so than like trying to specify the exact number of pieces present. It's trying to more set out a standard, like, the sort of combo that, could be, placed alongside 2-card combos like Thassa's Oracle Demonic Consultation. The things that are maybe somewhere in line with that are the ones we're trying to target here. And we're trying to draw a line somewhere between that and like the 5-card combos that arise out of a lot of synergy decks.
At what point do you draw this line? Do we say no 2, 3, 4, 5-card infinite combos? Like, where's the mark? Like, I feel 2 hits the majority of what we're trying to target. And again, if people want to play 3-card combos and actually everybody, yeah, sure, you can do that. But you're probably not going to be invited back to the pod if, again, the end game discussion was, hey, I didn't actually have fun there.
All right. Well, this is the perfect time, I think, to pivot into the game changer list.
Yeah.
The game changer list is 40 cards, 1 for each life point total. And these cards basically have been deemed by the panel to be very powerful cards. I would list all of them, but once again, there's 40. They're up on the screen now. Thank you, Yusuf. So it's been mentioned that there was originally more game changers. And the question I've been itching to ask is, were there any game changers that got cut that you feel actually belong on here?
So, yeah, I think it's really important to stress that I don't agree with every card on this list. And there's probably, again, other people in the CFP who think there should be other cards on this list. Again, I don't think it's leaking here, but Narset was originally on this list. Narset, Potter of the Veils. And that was a last minute remove from the list. Which the reason that she was removed, as far as I remember in the discussions, was, it's a planeswalker with 3 to 5 loyalty that should be easily removed. if that, again, don't quote me on that. I can't remember if that was the exact reasoning. That's what I remember reading at one point. But if that's the reason for Narset, why the hell is Drannith Magistrate on this list? Get it off. Get free Drannith Magistrate.
You want Drannith Magistrate off of the game
I
changers?
don't think
he
should be on the game changers list. That's one that I'm very staunch on. I don't think should be on the list.
That's spicy. Dale, is there anything that you think should be on or off?
So I don't know that, I'm sure I could think of things in particular, and I didn't really think about that beforehand. I will say that the list being, I would probably add things to the list, if anything, and I think the list being only 40 cards has resulted in a lot of players going, oh, I don't really run those cards. Am I a level 2 deck? Or, oh, I only run like one of those cards. I'm clearly a level 3 deck, even though, you know, maybe they're doing a fast combo. And I think maybe there is a little bit of confusion, I guess, that naturally arises out of a list with only 40 cards on it that seems to be like the front page feature of a particular bracket. You know, that's kind of the defining feature of bracket 3 is you could have 3 of these cards. Now, obviously, there are other things present, and I think people should maybe take more indication from kind of the broader vibe of the bracket, but that is kind of the front page thing. And I think the fact that it only has 40 cards on it does maybe make people think their deck should be in a lower bracket than perhaps it should.
So I think, so I just want to interject here, because I think it's really important to, again, it's the whole peel back the curtain here. So this is a beta. This is a list of 40 cards. The original list that we were discussing, you know, we were talking about cards, should they not be on this, was about 150 cards. So again, we're in that weird spot where it's like, where do you draw the line? Like, you know, 40 cards is already a lot.
It's weird to me too, because there's a really like tonal, like insanely different game changers on this list as well. That gives me like no through line for these cards. Because I see Tergrid, God of Fright, and I immediately think this card is ass.
But
like, it's awful, but it's clearly here because it's fun to play against.
Tergrid is miserable at brackets 1, 2, and potentially 3. Like, yeah, she probably sees no CDH play. But if someone rocks up with a Tergrid deck, you are in for a miserable time unless you're ready to deal with that, which I think the decks at brackets 1, 2, and potentially 3 aren't really equipped to deal with that.
Yeah, it's just funny to see her next to Rhystic Study, which is like the best card in CEDH. So it's really funny to see like cards next to each other where one is obviously just awful to play against, but not necessarily a strong card, next to a card that's, well, I guess both awful to play against and a strong card. But, you know, it's weird because I don't really get a through line on what a game changer is just by looking at this list, besides, oh, they're cards that are either strong or miserable to play against, or both.
Yeah, so I think this goes nicely into my Drannith Magistrate argument, because for me, so I understand. So let's just clarify what Drannith Magistrate does here for anyone who hasn't done it, seen it before. So 1/3, it says opponents can't cast spells that weren't cast from their hand. That's pretty much the gist of it.
Yeah, you can't cast spells from anywhere
so
other than your
shutting down
hand.
the cards you get off Cascade. It's shutting down Suspend, Plot, Flashback, casting cards from graveyards via other means. And obviously the biggest thing, is shutting down your commander. But this is where I pull up the Always Sunny in Philadelphia meme. Is how is it that 3 players don't have a single piece of interaction between them?
Yeah, that's a very fair argument. And then once a Drannith Magistrate's off the chart, you can also take Underworld Breach off, because Drannith Magistrate counters Underworld Breach.
I don't know.
Yeah, oh yeah, Drannith stops Breach as well. But I think keep Breach on this.
Okay.
We have like you said before, we all have our opinions. I mentioned last episode why I think Breach should not be on this list. There are arguments for it too, to be clear, but I think a lot of them are caught up in, I think a lot of them are caught up in the 2-card combo thing, though.
Oh,
like,
Breach.
Sorry,
I won't go into it.
Red deserves it. Red deserves
but again,
it.
if you think about it so if you take Breach off the list, sweet. It's now allowed in brackets 1, 2, and it's just a free card to put in brackets 3. Like, do you want to see those tiers of decks facing down Underworld Breach? Like you put
run Grave Hate.
I mean, the player putting Underworld Breach in their deck 9 times out of 10 is doing it to do something nefarious with it. Let's be honest.
I also feel like Breach is just such a powerful card. Like it's
Breach is incredibly powerful. I agree.
Yeah, it costs 1 less than Yorgamos will, and that was an amazing card.
It's a powerhouse because it doesn't even exile the cards it casts. You could just, even if no LED,
you can Mishra's Bauble.
Yeah,
no, I love that. I think it's totally fair, because when is this happening? Like very late in the game when you're not Grave Hated. I think there's enough answers to it. I don't know. Like we can agree, we can disagree. We can talk about this all podcast too.
Fair.
The comments will decide our fate.
Do you want to get into the other big one that I think is missing from this list? Like I did one of those things where I put up a post and it's like little to no likes on it, but it's got over 100 something comments.
What is your number two on this?
So I think this is the correct decision. I think Farewell is a fair card and shouldn't be on this list.
I talked about this for so long the other day with you and Mauld and Arcosa in our Discord. I think Farewell should be on this list. I mean, I want you to start by giving your reason why it shouldn't be on it.
This is the thing that set everybody off. So I called it a fair card because it hits everybody equally. I understand it has different modes, and but the enchantment player just picks the creature mode and they don't play any creatures. Okay, yeah, Wrath of God does that as well. It doesn't, but if you do have creatures, it hits your creatures and it hits all of your opponent's creatures. Not to mention, I digged into it as well. There are cards like that you can say that are similar. If I had a Rest in Peace and Wrath of God, that's 6 mana. I understand it's 2 cards. Does the same thing though.
That's 100% more cards than a Farewell is.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, like I get that. I understand it's an annoying card, but it treats everybody equally. There's no discrimination.
Perfect white card. Snail, where do you stand on Farewell?
See, I despise the card. I think it's trash design, but it's a 6 mana card. I don't think it's like on par with a lot of the other things in the Game Changers list. So like, I hate the card, but ultimately, I could go either way on it.
Here's my angle, and here's why I disagree with both of you and think you're stupid and awful. So for me, when is a 6 mana card going to go on the stack most often? Is it going to be in a bracket 3 or 4 game, or is it going to be 1 and 2? You're going to see more Farewells in brackets 1 and 2. Secondly, the Game Changers list is not based on power. Farewell is miserable to play against if you are not in white or blue. White can phase out their permanence and dodge it. Blue can counter it. But when it comes to black, green, and red, well, red already gets screwed by board wipes. That's, you just take the L there. My favorite way to counter board wipe in red is just have a Goblin Bombardment in play and sack all my creatures and point it at the player who's casting the board wipe, right? But black and green, the Golgari player in me is showing a little bit of bias. The black comeback from a board wipe is to reanimate the things that got wiped. And for green, it's to redeploy things from your hand and rebuild. So green gets off a little easier than black does. I think black gets absolutely screwed by Farewell, and to green a lesser extent, and red always gets screwed by wipes. For me, the fact that an artifact deck can run Farewell or an enchantment deck can run Farewell, and then one-sided wrath everything from an opponent is incredibly strong.
You can't use that argument though, because the artifact and enchantment decks are running cards like Wrath of God and all the other creature removals or one-sided removal cards. Like that, I feel like that the argument falls flat there.
Yeah, but the thing is where does green protect their board from a wrath? It's going to be heroic intervention. Where does black protect their board? It's with reanimation after the wipe. Farewell shuts both of these play patterns off for both of these colors. Also, the Selesnya player who can't afford a Teferi's protection is running Rapid Vigor and what have you as a budget alternative gets blown out by Farewell. I think my least favorite thing about Farewell is the play pattern is either just kill the white player immediately, which is fair, but also the second play pattern is to sandbag your plays, which just feels awful to do. If a counterplay to a card is I can't kill the player with it fast enough, so I'm just not going to play Magic.
There's 3 other players on the table. It feels a little
tough to me. And once again, the Game Changers list isn't really about power anyway. It's about game feel, right? Like once again, Turgrid's on here, Vorinclex is on here. These cards aren't on here because they're strong and powerful. It's because they're miserable to play against. That's where Farewell really lands for me. Is I think it's just like it makes the game move so glacially slow.
I don't like the argument of black's only answer is reanimation. Not every black deck is a reanimated deck. So like they just need to do the other thing they do really well. Draw cards, make people lose life, all of that stuff. Like black solely doesn't reanimate. Green as well. It's got easy way. I feel like it's got easy ways to recover. Again, in terms of card draw, just overly statted creatures for cheap that they can quickly redeploy.
Yeah, it just breaks my heart to see the board mean less in a game of Commander, and Farewell does that very single-handedly.
Yeah. I will say, looking at the Game Changers list, seeing Jin Gataxias on there, I'm feeling more swayed to the anti-Farewell arguments because I cannot be convinced that card is any less fair or any more fair or any more enjoyable than Jin Gataxias. Like, Jin Gataxias is just not that bad.
Jin Gataxias, if you think about it, is very unfair. He gives you 7 cards each turn and strips your opponent's hand.
If you don't have an answer for Jin Gataxias the turn he comes down, you're reduced to 1 card per turn.
But everyone has an answer all the time because Drannith Magistrate shouldn't be on the list.
I still have my 7 cards with Drannith.
If you have an instant speed answer, you can deny the card draw. I feel like a sorcery speed answer to a 10 mana card is just not asking that much, but I don't know.
So we have a few final things to say about the Game Changers list. If you want to take that away, Attack on Cardboard, I know you have something you want to say about it.
Just jumping into the bands? Or actually, no, should I say the other spicy one? We should put Soul Ring on the Game Changers list.
I agree.
I'm here for it.
I think it's funny.
I mean, if anyone's heard me talk about Soul Ring before, I mean, I despise the card. I still hate the idea that even if we look at the Game Changer list right now, Grim Monolith, Lion's Eye Diamond, Mana Vault, obviously we just had Mana Crypt banned, and still, I understand it's the poster child of the format. It's in every precon. Can you imagine banning Soul Ring? But I don't know. Do we need it at brackets 1 and 2? Come on, just put it on the Game Changers list.
I think I agree with you, just low key. I do like that it's just hyper budget, so everyone has a Soul Ring if they're inclined to it. I think that's the main argument for Soul Ring, and I know you can't really argue budget about the Game Changers list, really, but it's just so accessible, right? And that can't not be a factor.
Yeah, I mean, this is the whole. So I hate the mana base restriction of Commander. How expensive it is to build an optimal mana base if you're building a 3-color deck. Like, it's the whole, okay, I've got $100 to spend. Do I want to spend it on cool cards, or do I want to spend it on lands? Like, thinking from a, intermediate player hat. Like, of course, you want to spend it on the cool cards that do things, but then you just get shafted because all your lands come into play tapped, and then you're a turn behind everybody else.
As Richard Garfield intended. You do have one final thing you want to mention about the Game Changers list and potential unbans in the future, isn't that right?
Yeah, so we did mention in the article that unbans are potentially a possibility, and if anything gets unbanned, it will move to the Game Changers list, be monitored there, and then there is potential for it to be moved off of the Game Changers list. Now, Gavin has said in the article that we may do this in late April. So I don't know. To be honest, I don't know what needs unbanning. I am 100% voting against unbanning Mana Crypt, Dockside, and Jeweled Lotus, because people shouldn't be rewarded for the awful things that they have said. So yeah, feel free to direct that all at me, but I'm always voting to keep those cards banned.
I just hate those cards designs, quite frankly. I'm kind of happy that they're not in the format anymore. I am happy to hear arguments otherwise about why it enables your funny, like, 18 mana commander deck or whatever. Like, a Jeweled Lotus is needed for your 8 mana commander, but like, oh man, these cards are so just like a blight on the format, I feel. Even like without the whole like outside external forces that happened when the handover happened and all that, like, ugh. I do not see Panoptic Mirror going to the Game Changers list. That card is horrible. Do you guys know what Panoptic Mirror is?
So let's see, like, repeat a spell. You can like exile spell with it, right?
It got banned because it's an infinite turn combo thing. It's a 5 mana artifact from Darksteel. It has imprint for X and tap. You remove an instant or sorcery card with mana value X. You exile one from your hand with that much mana. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you may copy the imprinted card and you may cast it without paying its mana cost. So the idea is you play this for 5 and then you X5 tap, you exile Time Warp to it. And then on your next upkeep, you get to cast Time Warp for free, and you do that every upkeep. So if you get to untap with this card after spending 10 total mana and tapping it, and you get to untap with it, then you take infinite
eventually
turns.
You put Time Stretch on it, and then you can imprint another card onto it, and then get that card every other turn as well.
Powerful. So yeah, I don't need to explain what a 2-for-1 is, hopefully, to an audience. And this screams it. It's also 10 mana. Anyway, this card sucks, and I think it should be unbanned. let that sink in.
I don't want to delve too deep into the individual cards, just because part of me wonders what the sort of percentage of players following this new bracket system will be. Because obviously, I think the vast majority of Commander players follow the current banned list. But if this bracket system is being kind of set out as a tool that players can use to organize games, that feels like it kind of conflicts with the idea that you can take things off the ban list, because if only, say, 50% of players are following the bracket system, but then, most people are following the banned list, if you start shuffling things off the banned list, that might run into a conflict. Yeah.
Like, how do you mean?
Are we assuming 100% adherence to the bracket system? I feel like it's a little bit unclear. Like, is it a tool? Is it a thing that everybody's expected to follow?
Well, the banned list, the banned list is something that everybody follows full stop for Commander. Outside of Rule 0 conversation, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Right. So if we just happen to unban something there, like that doesn't change anything. The people who are following the banned list are still going to follow it. Like let's say we unban Dockside tomorrow. Like it doesn't change anything for the people who are only following the bans list, aside from now they get to play with Dockside. Likewise with the bracket system, they're still following the banned list, because we obviously brackets 4 and 5 have the, anything goes apart from the banned list. Like I don't understand what problem would arise from this.
Bracket 5 is also something that weirds me out a little bit that I didn't mention earlier. Like, why does CEDH have a bracket when it's just kind of understood that CEDH is just show up, we're going to try and win?
No, but it's still, I think, required, surely. Like if we're just talking about the power scale of Magic, the top end of Commander power is CEDH. That's just there. Like it would be weird not to include it on the list, surely.
If the list doesn't serve them, then why are they on the list? Right? Like it's like kind of like a catch-22 where it feels weird where it isn't there, but it doesn't do anything there.
I mentioned this in my video where it's like the unspoken rule 0 for CEDH. You ask your friend or your the people at the table, hey, do you want to play CEDH? And they say yes. That's it. That's the conversation. You start playing the game. Like that's their, hey, I brought a bracket 5 deck with me, and everyone's like, oh yes, sweet, so did we. And then they start playing. So it's trying to have that conversation available for obviously the other power levels of play. And again, we could have easily not put it on there and the CEDH community would have done their own thing. But I think it still is right to include them there. They're still part of the Commander community at large.
Yeah, that I agree with. I don't like that it makes the number of brackets odd. I like when there isn't a middle point.
On that, we initially floated the idea of 3 brackets, and it was basically...
My deck is always a 2.
my deck is a 7 and CEDH. And everyone was like, no, that's not enough, wiggle room for the decks in between. So I think 5 gives us a nice thing. Because again, if you think about it, you've got bracket 1, Lasagna tier, bracket 5, CEDH, bracket 3 fits nicely in the middle, and then you've got the 2 stages in between each of those brackets. Yeah.
I know I've just been mentally dividing the 10-point scale by 2 to be like, oh, it's a bracket 3 deck. Cool.
I don't like oh my gosh, just more things come to mind right before I'm about to transition into the question zone proceed to the mirror. I don't like how a lot of deck building websites have rolled out how you're like the bracket, guesstimator. I know like a lot of them say like, hey, you should reset this. This is just a guess of what it is. But like, it should not be just serving you a number based on your deck. Cause a lot of people are going to be like, oh great, this is bracket 2. and just walk with that with a combo deck, right?
Yeah.
Because they don't have any game changers or tutors in there.
It's just one of those weird things where, again, damned if you do, damned if you don't. Like, we want people to be using this system. And if they went live and just didn't have it on, or, clearly like a big, massive red button that says Commander Bracket Evaluation here, like, people just aren't going to use it. Or at least now, if they see it, they might look into it and start learning about it. And again, because that's what we want, right? We want people to be using this system. We want people to give back their feedback. But yeah, 100%, we're back into the picture versus the article problem, where people are looking at that number and being like, oh, Moxfield or Architect says my deck is a 2. That's what it must be then, without understanding that the intent piece comes into play as well. So yes, it might be listed as a 2, but the way that you've built it and what you're trying to do here is actually a 3. But again, all comes back to that initial conversation. Do we want to talk about one thing we didn't touch on? I think we should definitely talk about, just going back to the brackets. We didn't talk about mass land denial or mass land destruction at all. I think it's worth discussing with mass land denial, Blood Moon. So this comes back to, I'm on two minds about this. So I don't think Blood Moon should, pay the pay the price of Armageddon's sins. So Blood Moon punishes greedy mana bases, but players need these mana bases obviously to be able to play their games. Like, not everybody can just run your 3 basic lands, but there are so many powerful lands out there that you need a way to shut off. Again, really hard to say whether or not Blood Moon should be on the mass land denial list or not.
I like Blood Moon a lot. I think Magus of the Moon, in fact, is even fairer than a Blood Moon.
Oh yeah, yeah. But they're also considered mass land denial, so you're not allowed to run those as well in the first 3 tiers.
I think that's entirely valid. I think if we were asking this question maybe 10 years ago, it would be different, but we've just gotten like a cascade of different land options. We've gotten MDFCs. We've gotten all sorts of things that it feels like
literally Modern Horizons 3, like Arena of Glory, and like these lands are broken.
It feels like Wizards of the Coast has been screaming in my ear for the past 10 years, pull the basic lands out of your goddamn commander decks, idiot. And right. I feel like having Blood Moon in that context feels wrong to me.
Yeah, because it feels like, again, even if we think about the mana base situation, surely at Exhibition Core, you're going to be playing with, more often than not, more basic lands than you are non-basic lands. So does Blood Moon or Magus of the Moon get a pass there? I feel like it should. And the whole, 3 players, no interaction between them does come up. But again, I think it's the whole, because I guess, this is another interesting point. So initially, for mass land denial, we were going to list out just all of the mass land denial cards and just be like, this one and this one and this one. Because I remember, I'm pretty sure I voted against putting Blood Moon on this list. But then it was like, how do you police that? What actually counts as mass land destruction, as we were discussing it originally? And then, Gavin came out with if it impacts 4 or more lands per player, that counts as mass land denial. So, I don't know. Again, tough to say. Can't really make an exception for Blood Moon, but I wish it didn't have to pay the price for Armageddon sins.
It's the sort of thing where I wish Commander existed in a place where, greedy mana bases could be defined by mana bases with low counts of basics, but that's just not the format we live in. That's just, lots of decks run lots of non-basics for lots of reasons. It's not just people running these big 4-color mana bases.
Is it worth it running effects like, do you think it's like, in this current day and age, do you think it's worth running wasteland type effects like Tectonic Edge, Wasteland?
I run Sinkhole and Iara.
We had the Brothers War and Demolition Field as well, like those little like one-off effects.
I always make sure that there's one way to answer a land in the deck. It's very nice that Generous Gift and Beast Within both can do so. So it's nice when that's in there. I like to have 1 or 2 ways to answer a land. Typically my decks will have like 6 pieces of Graveyard Hate though. That's the thing that I feel people don't run enough.
But Farewell's the bad guy.
I don't run into problem lands very often. My play group runs mostly budget decks, which excludes a lot of lands just because lands tend to be expensive. And I tend to play in mid power pods at my local game store, which I don't really see a whole lot of like Fields of the Dead or Glacial Chasms, which I think is appropriate for mid power. I think those cards, belong on the Game Changers list. I don't remember whether Fields of the Dead is on the Game Changers list. I know Glacial Chasm is. But I feel like problematic lands tend to be less common in mid power, in my experience.
Yeah, fair.
I think it's now about time for the Beseech the Mirror section of the podcast. This is where we take questions from our lovely audience and answer them on the podcast. Yay. So to get your question answered, please leave a comment that starts with mirror so we can easily find your questions. Our first question here comes from Ski Glovesy. Mirror, I tap 2 full wardrobes to beseech thee. I was recently inspired by Altenac the Thrice Called to revisit my Erixmathes commander deck, which is jumping through as many hoops as possible to avoid playing rampant growth, but still get Erixmathes on turn 3. What are your favorite weirder ways of ramping? Do you want to start us off? Attack on cardboard.
Oh man, pressure. Just trying to think. I don't think I play enough weird ramp decks. Like I like what was the card from New Capenna? It's a red rock for 3 that taps and you can put a charge counter on it. And then eventually you can sacrifice it to get mana equal to the number of charge counters on it.
I know the one you're talking about. Yeah, I don't remember the name though.
Glittering Stockpile. 2 in a red, tap, add red, put a stash counter, and then you can tap, sacrifice it, add X mana in any one color where X is the number of stash counters on it.
I like that card because it's a 3 mana rock. You can still use it as ramp, and it just, again, sits there and just slowly grows. And then, 4 turns later or whatever, you just get 4 extra mana just to go for gold. And obviously there's the whole proliferate synergy as well. Yeah, just nice little weird one that if I'm playing red, I'll try and find a way to slot it in.
Yeah, I love a lot of different ramp in a lot of different strategies. So it's hard to narrow it down to one. I think my favorite is probably like brought back effects. I'm thinking cards like Second Sunrise that says return all permanent cards that were put there from the graveyard to the battlefield. So you get to reanimate everything that died that turn. Brought back is up to 2 target things that were put in a graveyard from the battlefield this turn. And you do that with fetch lands, right? So you crack 2 fetch lands and then you bring them back into play from the graveyard to the battlefield because they're permanents that left play. And then you get to recrack them. So that white ramp to me is always like infinitely so funny.
I personally am a fan of, and this is a little bit niche, but depletion lands are funny if you want to get an extra like explosive boost of mana curving out before, obviously you lose the lands eventually, but these are lands that they'll tap for 2 mana twice and then they get sacrificed. I find those funny if you don't care so much about having them there long term.
Mirror. Oh, wait, no, never mind. We hate these kinds of questions. It's going to be so hard to answer. What's your favorite printing of a creature token? Like, come on.
Half of these questions I don't have a good answer for. Like, I can come up with an answer.
Like, who has that on man? Like, what is your favorite X is like always like a question that's so hard to answer on the spot.
All right, I've got the answer to that one. That's easy. It's the windmill construct from one of the unsets. It's just like a windmill with legs.
That's awesome. I didn't know that even existed. Our next question comes here from Eric, King of Scots. Mirror, I sacrifice this episode's Beseech the Mirror to beseech you. We didn't have one last week, so I'm going through the last 2 comments to do so. You get to be lead designer for an upcoming set. What plane are we visiting, either new or returning, and what's the main concept for the set, either mechanically or story-wise?
Bring back the Eldrazi. I want to hear more about the Eldrazi. I don't know which plane we're going to. I mean, potentially we're going back to Innistrad, but I feel like we would ideally cut to the new plane that's getting invaded by Emrakul. I always like I do the threat. Whenever I talk about Bloomburrow, there is Bello. If you look at his staff, he has a Hedron in his staff. And so he could I feel like he could accidentally summon the Eldrazi to Bloomburrow.
What does Emrakul become on Bloomburrow? Is she just a giant squid? Or
yeah, but see, this is the thing, right? The Bloomburrow rule is the planeswalkers that planeswalk there. The Eldrazi Titans cross the blind eternities themselves. They just rock up They don't planeswalk.
They're also like anti-magic, kind of. That's their whole thing, is they devour magic. So maybe they just don't get polymorphed at all. Yeah.
Yeah. We have the set where the 3 Titans rock up to Bloomburrow.
You can actually have 13 squirrels block Emrakul.
Yeah, we can finally make it a real thing.
I think for me, man, I really want like more angels. Angels are my favorite creature type. I was super like tentatively excited for New Capenna, and then they just made like the ugliest angels in the world. I hate New Capenna angels. It also just makes no sense that there's like angels in the gangs, even though all the angels got petrified or whatever, according to the Magic story. Man, I want biblically accurate angels in a Magic setting. How cool would that be? Like floating eyes and stuff. I want to go to, what is it called? Xerex or whatever. It was on one of the invasions in March of the Machine, Invasion of Xerex. The Vertex Paladin on the back. It's like an MC Escher plane. I want to see the wacky art that comes out of that. And I want to see some cool, like geometric, scary angels.
Do you know the backstory for the Zendikar angels?
I know that they cover their eyes because they didn't help with the Eldrazi.
Yeah, I freaking love that. That's so cool.
Angels have some of the hardest art in the game. I love them to death, except for New Capenna angels. What about you, Snail?
It's going to sound weird. Amonkhet is one of my favorite planes, and I don't think Aetherdrift did it justice. I want more Exert. I want more cycling. Give me another Amonkhet return.
Well, there was that card on the in one of the precons that talks about the fly god.
I know.
Oh, what was there was two gods that it referenced that we haven't seen before. One of them was the fly. Oh, it's the wasp, literally the fly and the wasp god.
Yeah, This card is, I think it's a new card, right?
No, it's a reprint.
All the zombies got new art and stuff in the zombie precon, which is something I love, even though I think the deck's design is kind of... Yeah, it's on Corpse Augur. Hail the fly, the wasp, the scarab, the locust, and the scorpion. There's 2 new gods on there, so hinting at a future return to Amonkhet with more scary insect gods.
I'm here for that.
Well, I think that about wraps everything up. I don't want to do a really good outro to the podcast though, because we never do one, and it's kind of like iconic at this point. So
sick.
Sol Ring should be banned. Come and fight me.
I have a video about that, about how it shouldn't be banned, actually.